Hello and welcome everybody to another Booze Hour Cloud Edition. Today I'm joined by Sam Gabrail from HashiCorp, and we'll bring him on in a second here, but just wanted to go through a couple announcements with you guys. As far as catching up on videos, so this past Monday, Sam was actually our guest on Daryl and Boo's weekly update, so that's something to check out. We go through some Q&A. Maybe we can even discuss Sam's friend's $500 car and find out how that saga continued on with the car. But also there is another live stream tomorrow. So that's at 3:30 Pacific time, and that's with Alex Dow. That should be a really interesting one as well. That's a community edition Booze Hour. So we'll just talk to Alex about the communities that he has been building over the years. If you aren't familiar with Alex, he is the guy that is one of the main organizers for Vancouver B-Sides, very popular event that we have in Vancouver. He's also responsible for a number of other events as well, Van City Sec, I believe, and I believe the Ready Room Briefings, which is a smaller event that he puts on as well. That's always sold out. So he's donated so much of his time towards building communities, and I thought he'd be a great guest to have on to talk about community. Besides that, also wanted to share that if you didn't catch this already, on the weekly update, I have uploaded everything as a podcast at this point. So I've gotten a lot of feedback from folks that while they enjoy seeing us on video, they also would prefer to just listen to our soothing voices instead. So I have uploaded us to Apple Podcast, to Google Play Podcast, and to Spotify as well. So those are a couple options for folks to be able to consume this type of content. Previously, the Booze Hour Community Edition was the only one that it was uploading in podcast format. But now Community Edition, Cloud Edition, which is what we do on days like today, and the weekly update are all available across those platforms. Just look up Booze Hour. In addition to that, we're still continuing to run our subscriber giveaway. So if you're watching this via YouTube right now and not on podcast, if you are on podcast, head over to YouTube and look up Daryl and Boo on YouTube, but hit subscribe. Everybody that is subscribed and has subscribed previously is all entered into the subscriber giveaway. It's a weekly giveaway, $50 Amazon gift card. We're just going to keep doing that for a little while. The additional YouTube channel, Booze Hour B-Roll channel, is something I'd like to remind everybody about as well. That's where I store all the clips. So not to clutter up the main channel, but there's a bunch of clips that are available on the Booze Hour B-Roll channel and highlights. And then I'm thinking about some additional content that I could put on there as well, just to make things interesting, but stuff that wouldn't fit onto the main channel. Also, there is an Instagram account, also just where I put clips on there if you just prefer interacting with things via Instagram. And also there is a website that's just darylandboo.com. And all that is if you're receiving the links to the videos via Daryl's email newsletter that he sends out every week, it's just a replica of that. So, even if you're not on that mailing list, just head over to darylandboo.com, and there's just the weekly newsletter, and that's where all the links for all the F5 technical updates are found. All right, so with that, I've spoken lots. I will go ahead and bring on Sam here. Hey, Sam, how's it going?
Hey, Boo, good. How are you?
Good. So I wanted to ask you, actually, after your episode on Monday there, where you joined us, if your friend got his car across Canada without any problems.
He did. They actually took him, I want to say 3 days.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, him and his fiance drove it back, so they were taking shifts. So they did very well on time.
Yeah, and so for folks who didn't catch this on the Q&A, Sam mentioned one of his friends who had a $500 car. It broke down in Nanaimo, and then he bought another car and then drove that car from Vancouver back across east. So was that second car a $500 car?
No, it was a new Nissan. I can't remember what it's called. It's that box. I can't remember.
Oh, the Nissan Cube.
Is it? Yeah, that's the one. Nissan Cube.
Okay.
So we used it, in on Vancouver Island. He bought it from Victoria, and then he drove it back to Ontario. We flew back, but he drove it back.
Oh, wow. Oh, cool. Yeah, that was a neat vehicle. I don't know if you recall, they had the mood lighting in that vehicle.
Oh, okay.
So all of the, and I know this because a friend of mine actually won a Nissan Cube. So a friend of mine, Craig Zabel, if he's watching right now, I'm sure he isn't, but if he is watching, he's a musician, and there was actually a contest for, I think it was a songwriting contest that he won, and the prize was a Nissan Cube, and it was all done through social media. So you'd have to go, and this was probably 8 years ago, you'd have to go online and vote, and through these gates in this tournament. Anyways, the grand prize was this Nissan Cube, and he made a funny video about the Nissan Cube, about how it has mood lighting. And so along underneath the dash and along the doors and stuff, you could actually change the colors of all of the LEDs and whatnot to fit your mood, which I think is also a feature on like Rolls Royces.
Oh,
So
wow.
you get the feeling of mood lighting from a Rolls Royce in your Nissan Cube.
I should have spent more time with him in that cube.
Yeah, cool. So we had you on Weekly Update. We had Bill Hunka on Weekly Update the week prior to that as well. If anybody wants to check that out, a lot of people in BC will know who Bill is. And you can watch the Q&A that he went through. But we had you guys on specifically because because HashiCorp is a great partner of F5. So, and we can talk through that. We can talk through some of the things that we work on together there. But it really made sense to have you on. And then you mentioned that you have all this content that you've created from when you first started at HashiCorp, right?
Yeah, that's correct. Yep. So happy to walk you through the first portion of that.
Yeah, cool. Right on. Did you want me to pop up your screen?
Yeah, if you don't mind. Just let me know when it's ready.
There it is. Cool. So weblog app part 1, infrastructure as code with Terraform. Cool.
There we go. All right, so a little bit about the background. First of all, this is a web blog that I have here. It's on Medium, so you can check it out. I kind of put all my notes in here, all my learnings and so on. But the idea here was that when I joined HashiCorp, HashiCorp has a number of tools, and I figured, well, I'd like to kind of look at it from the perspective of a developer. How would you learn these tools? Why use any of the HashiCorp tools? And where the benefits are. So I decided to take it one at a time and do that by actually developing my own application. So I had previously been part of a Python Flask course, developing just a web application with Python. And I decided, hey, why not use this application as part of my learning with the HashiCorp tools? So the first part, I've broken this down into 4 parts that kind of line up with the 4 commercial tools that HashiCorp has. HashiCorp has 6, 2 of which are purely open source. And then Terraform, Vault, Consul, and Nomad are also open source, but they also have a commercial version as well. So the idea was, okay, well, I want to build this app. First thing you want to do is build the infrastructure to host this app, right? And a tool that's used for that is Terraform for provisioning. Whether you want to provision in a cloud environment or on-prem, it's an excellent tool that uses a concept called infrastructure as code. And we'll go through that in just a little bit, what that means and why that's helpful. And then from there on, started to explore what Vault is, why use secrets management, and then moving on to Consul's features, and then eventually Nomad. So I wrote 2 blog posts, one for Terraform, one for Vault. The other 2, Consul and Nomad, are still in the works. But for today, let's just focus on Terraform to begin. Sound good?
Cool. Sounds good.
Excellent. So there's our TLDR. If you're busy, you can just go into the repos and take a look and run the code yourself. I also have a video here that you can explore with a quick demo.
I like that you put that first, because a lot of people like to consume that way, right? I find right now I can send people a repo
Yeah.
and they have everything they need in there, and they don't need all the documentation, or the documentation is already built into the repo. So let them have at it if they want to do it that way.
Exactly. And some people are already familiar with Terraform. They just want some snippets of the code so they can go straight to that. So the prerequisites here, really, I wanted to build the app on Kubernetes. So I needed some sort of Kubernetes environment. I chose Google's GKE. So that's the first part. Then Terraform Cloud, I'm using the free edition. There's actually a piece there that's not mandatory, but nice to have, called Sentinel. We'll talk about it. It makes a lot of sense for organizations, for policies. And then I'm using GitLab for my version control system.
All free.
Yep, all free. You can probably use the free tier on GCP as well. Cool. So the infrastructure as code concept is itself, think of it as codifying your infrastructure, right? So some folks actually kind of are scared when they hear code. I'd like to refer to it mostly as infrastructure as configuration. So you're just writing some configuration to show your intent. What do you want to create in that environment? In my case, if you look at this picture here, and I'll zoom in a bit. In my case, I needed to deploy in GCP. So I deployed in this particular region. I needed the GKE cluster. And within this zone, created a few namespaces, one for console, one for Vault, and then my main namespace for the application itself. Like I mentioned, it's the Python Flask application, and it's talking to a Mongo database. And also on top of that, just cloud DNS, static IP addresses, and so on. So that's kind of the infrastructure that I needed. So the intent, this is the configuration or the code that you need to put in place so that Terraform can go out and build it for you. The beauty about that is that you have a version control system that actually stores all the code there. It's a single source of truth. And from there, you can have this code that could become reusable. If you want to destroy the infrastructure, you can do it right away. You can rebuild it. You can create a staging environment. And again, it's all checked into source code, so you can utilize it with other team members and so on. And also, I wanted to use this for demos as well. And I didn't want to have to, rebuild or having to go into a GCP and select what I need. And it takes time. I want to really rebuild it quickly and demo it quickly, and then tear it down when I'm done. So in general, I had 2 nodes in the GKE cluster. I had one console cluster and one Vault cluster, each made up of 1 node, and used Helm in Kubernetes Terraform Providers to run that. For those who don't know what a Terraform provider is, the way Terraform is built, you have the core engine that runs your configuration, but also you tie that in with providers. And those providers are the ones that, think of them as plugins that talk to the API of the thing that you want to configure, whether that's, in this case, Google's provider, also the Helm provider to create the application, and also the Kubernetes provider as well. So the first phase, because I'm laying down the infrastructure, the scaffolding, if you will, to eventually put the application on here, I needed to build console. I needed to build Vault because I'm going to consume secrets in Vault later on. And I'm going to do things like encryption. I'm going to do what we call dynamic secrets and so on. So I needed Vault to be there. And also console serves as the backend storage for Vault, but it's also going to be part of the service mesh that I'm going to use later on as well. And just notice that this is like multiple phases as I'm building this application. So here, what happens is I'm running GitLab as my version control system. Upon a commit and a push, Terraform automatically runs what we call a plan, which is a dry run of what you're going to configure in the cloud, in this case in GCP. So everything I asked it to do. And once you're happy with everything there, you can just run and apply, and it's going to go out and deploy the infrastructure that you asked it to deploy. There is also this concept of policy as code with Sentinel that is part of the commercial offering. I also show that really briefly because a lot of organizations want to have some policies in place when you're deploying infrastructure. So you want to make sure that a developer is not using a lot of resources where they shouldn't. So you can define things like the VM size that you're going to deploy, or the cost that you're allowing for each deploy, or even things like don't allow anybody to deploy anything after 5 p.m. on a Friday, for example, in production. I'm sure, Boo, you've seen that before, where when people are pulling their hair just before the weekend, and we don't want to do that. So
yeah, and you know what? We get these occasional emails internally at F5. We have access to Azure and AWS and GCP, but we get an occasional email with a tap on the shoulder saying, "Hey, check out your resources here. You may want to turn off a few things here." So something like policies will definitely help out with that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Cool. So let's just get out of here. So here is where you just set up. In this case, I'm using Terraform Cloud, as I mentioned earlier. And from here, you tie your Terraform Cloud to your version control system, which is GitLab. So you can see I'm using GitLab here with a specific repository. And in that same repository, I have actually two folders, one for the deployment of Vault and one for the deployment of Vault, deployment of GKE, the whole infrastructure, and then another one for the configuration of Vault itself. And I'll get into that in just a little bit. But basically, you can define what you want to trigger on. In my case here, I'm saying in this particular folder, under the root path in this repo, if anything changes in this folder, then go ahead and trigger a Terraform run or a Terraform plan. So that gives you some granularity, and you can have multiple what we call workspaces under a single repository in your version control system. Next, looking at some of the variables that you need when you're deploying Terraform. So you need the project that you're using in GCP, the cluster name, what kind of machines you're going to use. This is where I define a policy saying you're only allowed to deploy F1 micro, G1 small, N1 standard 1. Anything different, then the policy will catch it. You won't be able to deploy it. You can get a warning with an override. We call that a soft mandatory, or a hard mandatory where it just refuses to deploy anything. Here you define the node pool, how many nodes I need. I need 2. I also have a policy saying, anything below 10 is good. Otherwise, the policy also will fail. And at the bottom, this is where you define your credentials to access GCP. So you need this Google Cloud Key File JSON in here. And notice that it's sensitive write only. So you put it in, and that's it. Nobody can see it after you do that, which is actually encrypted using Vault under the hood. Cool. And after that, you queue the plan, and it's going to go through the process of planning and doing the dry run, going through the policies. Everything checks. You can hit an apply button. It's going to go out and configure your infrastructure. So that was phase 1 of the deployment phase, getting everything set up, GKE, Vault, and so on. The second phase was actually doing the Vault configuration itself. So in this case, there are multiple ways to configure Vault. You can do that through the CLI. You can do that through the API. Some configurations can be done through the UI of Vault itself. But again, I wanted this to be part of the code. I wanted this to be reusable. So one of the best practices is to use the Terraform Vault provider. And that's what I'm doing here. So before you can use that, best practices as well is to go in and initialize and unseal the Vault manually for security reasons, where you're going to get an unseal key, and you're going to get, when you initialize it, you're going to get an unseal key to unseal the Vault, and then you're going to get a root token to access the Vault for the first time. Once you do that, you can go ahead and move to this step, where once again, through the version control system, it will trigger Terraform to go ahead and configure Vault with whatever policies you have in place, whatever secrets engines, authentication backends, all of these things that need to be configured in Vault. Once again, it's done through code. It's in a version control system. Everybody can see it. as opposed to somebody going into Vault and going through the CLI and making changes, and then it's hard to keep track of what has been changed and so on. Cool. In here, once again, you do the same thing I showed earlier, but in this case, I'm triggering on a different folder inside my repo, which is called Vault Configuration. And you define some of the variables to access Vault. So you need the Vault token, the root token I talked about. I'm using it here. In reality, you probably want to create a different token, not the root token to be used in Terraform. But just for this use case, I use the root token. And again, you need your GCP credentials, and then also where actually Vault, the address of Vault, where it lives. You queue the plan and you run it. The policies we talked about earlier using Sentinel, and that can be configured under the policy sets in Terraform Cloud or Terraform Enterprise, in the same place where you can create those policies that are once again in version control system. In this case, I'm using GitHub. You can see the repo here, and this is tied into a specific workspace. You can do that, or you can say tie all the policies to all workspaces. So that's also an option. I run through a test here to show how you can trigger a policy to fail. So in this case, I failed both the machine type and node count. I put the node count, I think 11 or something, and then the machine type was a little higher than the one in the list here. So as you can see, in this case, they're both soft mandatory. So if you get high-level approval, you can override the policy and move forward. Of course, this is all audited as well. Or you can, discard this run, fix what needs to be fixed in the configuration, and go back and apply it. So that's pretty much it. I mean, I learned quite a bit by making a lot of mistakes here. Pulling my hair in many situations where I'm like, how come this is not working? And it's usually a simple fix that I didn't see. But definitely infrastructure as code is the way to go. Now, no problem. I can pull up a new environment, show it off, bring it down, create a staging environment, and so on. So it's some work that needs to be put up front. But once you put that work, things become a lot more easier after that.
Yeah. So do you find when you go speak with customers as well about Terraform, you can just leave them with this repo and they can redo your demo environment without you?
Yeah, pretty much. No, exactly. Mm-hmm.
Very powerful.
So I know, talking to Bill before the live session today, he wanted me to mention the certification program that we have for our different products. We have it right now for Terraform and Vault. So if you go to the website, HashiCorp.com, under certification, you can kind of see the Terraform Associate program or certification and Vault Associate exams here. It gives you some FAQs, but then you can go into the Terraform Associate one here, and it gives you more information about the exam, what topics or objectives that's covered. And in addition to that, you can see how to prepare for the exam, so what resources to use. So you can see a study guide that really goes into a lot of depth on what topics to be covered, with a lot of links in here. So definitely look into that. If you just want to learn about it, you can go to the website, and under resources, if you go under the Learn tab here or column, you can just go under the product guides and select any one of our products. If you want Terraform, for example, you can go and look at the Getting Started guide and all the other guides that we have. There's a lot of examples associated with the different products as well, so it'll help folks get started as well.
Mm. Yeah, I would say certification-wise too. I'm starting to notice a lot more people just focusing on cloud certifications, Azure certifications, into AWS certifications, into tools like HashiCorp. I think it's worth everybody's time to consider investing in their own training on this. And correct me if I'm wrong, it didn't look like you had to go to a course. Like you could study everything online in order to get ready for the exam. Right?
Pretty much, yeah. The Learn site is very powerful. We have a lot of really good material here. And that's our primary way to prepare for the exam, really.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Really cool.
Now, one other thing I wanted to touch on, we have a lot of integrations with different systems. And one I want to call out is our partnership with F5. And you can see there's a really good, we can probably link to this video where it talks about zero-touch application delivery with F5 Big IP, Terraform, and Console. Very, very good video, about just under an hour. So take a look if you're looking to use Terraform for F5 configurations. There's also the F5 Big IP provider. So I mentioned the plugins, we call them providers. I mentioned the GCP, Google Cloud provider. I think my phone just went off when I said Google. But
here's a summary from Wikipedia. Cloud computing is the on-demand availability of computer system resources, especially data storage and computing power, without direct active management by the user.
Wow. Always listening, huh? Always listening. So yeah, so here's another example of a provider, the F5 Big IP provider. And as you can see, there's different references, and you can look at the different things you can do, the resources that you can configure. I see a SNAT here. And I apologize, I haven't used F5 in a long time, but I think this is how you configure a source NAT.
Yeah. What I'll highlight on here, if you scroll up a bit, see Big IP AS3 there. So for folks who haven't gone through this, if anybody in Vancouver has come to any of our user groups in the past couple of years, we would have talked about AS3 and automation with AS3, and that's the declarative interface for F5. So while we have a provider command for all the individual commands in there, for the most part, you should be able to actually just have one declarative statement inside of an AS3 module there, and that will actually provision all of your Big IP for you. So awesome that we have that piece there. And I know the provider was the top requested item from our customers as they go into automation.
Awesome. That's great stuff. Yeah, and there's another link here on F5 itself. It talks about on F5's website itself, talking about F5 and HashiCorp top customer outcomes. We talk about provisioning F5 in public and private clouds, managing F5 application services, and automating service discovery as well. So some other resources that you can find valuable as well. Cool. And I think that's all I have for today.
Awesome. That is awesome, Sam. Thank you very much for coming on. Now, I know that you mentioned you have part 2 already done, and part 3 and 4 are coming as well. So we'd love to have you on again in a future live stream. Maybe go through part 2, and then when we have 3 and 4 done, we can carry this out as we go. But yeah, otherwise, thank you very much for coming on. I'm going to take a couple of those links. I'll throw them into the description for the YouTube video, so folks who are rewatching this can check it out that way. If you're listening to this via YouTube, just head over to, or I'll put it into the show notes on the YouTube as well, but head over to the YouTube as well if you want to check out any of this stuff. Otherwise, thank you very much, Sam. We'll catch you on the next one.
Thank you for having me.